Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
Bro, check his balls, bro. You bogus, bro. Don't do drugs. Don't do drugs, bro.
New light shed on famed body camera footage as ex-officer Tou Thao takes the stand in federal court. Plus, an ex-police captain stands trial for murder.
If you were to ask me objectively, tell me where the injury is, I'd say I don't appreciate one. What
does that mean, you don't appreciate one?
I would be like saying, tell me where I don't know what I'm looking for.
Hear testimony from the case's medical examiner. And the deaths of Lauren Smith Field and Brenda Rawls.
Why did the police department treat us like trash?
The families of both women now calling for police accountability. But first, 2 years after she's reported missing, a now 6-year-old girl is found hidden away. The latest in the case of Paislee Shultis. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. A little girl missing for nearly 3 years is found by police hiding under a staircase in her biological parents' home. Law and Crime's Angela Levy is here with more on the rescue of Paislee Shultis.
Brian, this story is really sad, but pretty amazing as well. On Valentine's Day, police in Saugerties, New York, searched the home of Paislee Shultis' biological grandfather and found her hiding with her mom at that home in Saugerties, New York. Now, Paislee's mom is Kimberly Shultis, and her father is Kirk, and grandfather is Kirk Shultis Sr. They are charged with felony custodial interference and misdemeanor child endangering. Paislee had been missing since July 2019. When she disappeared from the home of her custodial parents in Spencer, New York. Now, police always suspected the Shultises abducted her and had even searched that home several times before. Then on Monday, police said they were told that Paislee was being held in a secret room in the house. Police got a search warrant and saw something strange on a set of steps. They removed a floorboard from that step and found Paislee and her biological mom under that staircase. Now, police say it does not appear, and they do not believe, that Paislee was physically or sexually abused. And on a sad but sort of sweet note, as she was leaving the home with the police and the detectives, they passed a McDonald's restaurant, and she said, you know, it's been such a long time since I've had a Happy Meal. So they turned back around, they got her a Happy Meal. She has now been reunited with her older sister and her custodial parents. Brian?
Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Philip Hamilton and Terry Austin. Philip, mother, father, and grandfather are all charged with child endangerment and custodial interference. Do you see a defense here, or will they plea out?
You know, Brian, there may be a defense with respect to the child endangerment only because, as was reported, we do not have any signs of physical abuse, sexual abuse. It does seem in some respects Paislee was being taken care of. With regards to the custodial interference, that's an arena where there's going to be less of a defense because, of course, they were the non-custodial parents and who did not have that right to have Paislee in the way in which they were, holding that custody. So I think in many respects, there may not be a defense there, but they may be able to work out a plea just in regards to the fact that they are the biological parents, clearly probably acting because they cared, missed their daughter. We'll see ultimately what ends up happening.
Yeah, I can see maybe a probation, maybe no jail time in this case, but we'll see as it unfolds. Terry, finally, this warms my heart to finally be talking about a case where we're saying a young girl is rescued rather than finding a body. Your thoughts on the investigation that led to Paislee's safe return?
So many of these stories don't end well, Brian. I'm really pleased that Paislee was located, and thanks to that officer's keen eyes, he was able to notice something wrong about that step. But I am a bit concerned that so many children are missing, and she was missing for quite a long time. So more needs to be done as far as these cases are concerned.
Now, Angela, real quick, where is Paislee now, and what's the status of her biological grandfather and biological parents?
Well, the biological mother is still in jail, being held on a warrant, but the grandfather and the father have been released on some type of bail. I spoke with the chief of police, and he said that these people believed they were doing what was best for Paislee. They thought they were doing what was right, despite being taking her when custody had been awarded to someone else. And I'm also told that the reunion between the custodial parents, Paislee, and her older sister was really great. They were all happy to see one another. So we'll follow the story and have more for you as things develop.
Absolutely. And again, I cannot harp on this. We talk about so many tragic stories here On Law and Crime Daily, it's great to see a family reunited, and hopefully the criminal justice system can figure out something for this family. And a monumental settlement is reached in the Sandy Hook school shooting. Families of the victims are awarded $73 million from gun manufacturer Remington. 20 first graders and 6 staff members were killed in the 2012 shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. On Tuesday, Remington Arms settled liability claims stemming from the shooting. Victims' families argued Remington was negligent by selling a military and law enforcement style assault weapon to civilian consumers, specifically marketing it towards men in video games and ads. This marks the first time in United States history that a gun manufacturer has been held accountable for a mass shooting. And questions surrounding the death of late actor Bob Saget are circling the internet. A Florida judge ruled to temporarily block the release of records related to his death Wednesday, a day after his family filed a lawsuit to keep the documents private. The lawsuit comes a month after Saget was found dead in his hotel room in Orlando. The lawsuit claims the family would suffer irreparable harm if the photos, videos, and autopsy information were released. The 65-year-old's cause of death was ruled an accident, with the autopsy revealing the comedian suffered several head fractures and that there were no drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his death. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, we're following 2 separate trials out of Florida where 2 men are accused of committing murder. But first, the deaths of Lauren Smith-Fields and Brenda Lee Rawls, while their families say a federal investigation into their death is the next step towards justice.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. More than 2 months after the deaths of 2 black women in Bridgeport, Connecticut, their families are calling for a federal investigation. Co-host Terry Austin joins us now with the latest developments in the cases of Lauren Smith-Fields and Brenda Lee Rawls.
Brian, the families of Smith-Fields and Rawls both say the same thing. The Bridgeport Police Department did not notify them when their loved ones died. Now they're calling for change. Both 23-year-old Smith-Fields and 53-year-old Rawls died on December 12th of last year in separate incidents. Both were black women. Smith-Fields' death was determined to be an accidental overdose, while autopsy results are still pending for Lee Rawls. Family members of both women say their death investigations were botched based on systemic racism. At a virtual police commission meeting on Tuesday, family members called for the city's acting police chief to step down and for the Bridgeport mayor to submit a formal letter requesting a Department of Justice investigation.
I know the reason why the police officers perform like that in Bridgeport, because they can. And whenever having experience in leadership, whenever people does that, whenever employees do that, it starts at the top. It starts at the top. There's no oversight. Nobody's supervising them. Nobody's watching their performance, what they're doing, and how I know that. And that's why they believe they can do what they want to do.
I want to know what are y'all gonna do to change the situation? How are you gonna move forward handling how you handle Black women, Black people, people of color? I want y'all to know the whole world's watching how the Bridgeport Police Department is handling this case.
Although the Bridgeport acting police and the police commissioners listened on the teleconference, they did not make any further statements. Brian?
Thanks, Terry. Back to discuss the latest in the Smith-Fields and Lee Rawls investigation is criminal defense attorney Philip Hamilton and Terry Austin. Terry, what can the DOJ bring to this investigation that the local police could not, and do you think they will take this case?
Listen, I really do hope the DOJ takes this case. They have far more extensive resources than any local police department, including manpower, and they have these investigative tools that they can use. And if they accept the case, they really can determine whether or not there's a pattern in practice of discrimination or bias in the police department. So we could find out that they are ignoring the deaths of Black women. And it's far more objective if you have an independent third party like the DOJ. So I certainly hope they do take this case.
Philip, I'm guessing we're going to see some civil rights charges against Bridgeport, the city, and the police department soon. What do you suspect they will be?
Brian, to the extent that we do see any charges, it is going to somewhat mirror what we see going on in the George Floyd trial right now, which is to the extent if the police department is systematically, via pattern and practice, as Terry mentioned, neglecting the rights and willfully depriving the rights of Black citizens by virtue of investigating cases, botching cases, not taking cases seriously. To the extent that there's any corruption in that department, if that investigation finds as much, then those would be the charges I would expect to see come in regards to this case.
All right, so we'll keep eyes on both of these cases. Maybe the DOJ jumps in, maybe we see civil rights claims raised, but hopefully, either way, we get answers in both of these cases. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, an ex-Minnesota police officer takes a stand in his own defense as he faces federal charges in the death of George Floyd. Plus, 8 years after a deadly shooting, an ex-police captain stands trial for murder. The latest testimony in the trial of Curtis Reeves. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We head now to Florida for another day of testimony in the trial for accused serial killer Robert Hayes. On Wednesday, jurors got to hear and see evidence prosecutors say linked Hayes to the murders of 3 women a decade after they were killed. Hayes is on trial for the alleged murder of Laquita Gunther, Julie Green, and Iwana Payton, who authorities say were sex workers in the Daytona Beach area in the mid-2000s. In 2016, when another woman was murdered in West Palm Beach, Hayes' DNA was collected by investigators from a cigarette butt, making him a person of interest in the Daytona Beach murders. A genetics specialist testified Wednesday about building a family tree from DNA collected at the crime scenes, which led investigators to a relative of Hayes and ultimately to the defendant. Jurors also viewed a police interview with Hayes on the day of his arrest. Hear more from that on the next episode of Law and Crime Daily. Also in Florida, witnesses testified Wednesday about whether the defendant had any sign of facial injury when he shot and killed a man 8 years ago. It's the trial of retired police captain Curtis Reeves, who shot Chad Olson in a movie theater in what he says was self-defense. Prosecutors say Reeves was frustrated over Olson being on his cell phone during movie previews ahead of the film Lone Survivor. Reeves claims Olson was going to punch him and threw popcorn and something else at Reeves as he stood in the row in front of him. After that, Reeves pulled out a handgun and shot Olson. Olson's cell phone was later found near Reeves' feet, but several witnesses testified that Olson did not throw anything. On Wednesday, jurors heard what happened after the shooting. As witnesses say, he rubbed his eyelids and that they were red. The medical examiner who performed Olson's autopsy was asked about Reeves' face and what he, as an expert, would think of it if he were doing an autopsy on him.
You observed what we see in the photographs of Mr. Reeves. How would you describe him, if at all?
I don't even know if I don't even, like I said, would even say anything about it. It's so subtle. And, you know, people don't have monochromatic faces. Sometimes you'll see someone with a little bigger eye, little lower eye, maybe the lip is a little redder on that side, and you get to the point where you just describe something you know is an injury. This, I don't even know if I'd appreciate it as an injury.
On cross-examination, Reeves' attorney questioned the medical examiner about seeing a photo of Reeves' eyes rather than his face in person.
You looked at a photograph and the prosecutor asked you something about an injury to an eyelid. You remember that conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, certainly, you will agree with me that you cannot make a determination just based on a photo as to whether a person was injured or not.
I'm only assessing the photo. do I see a visible injury on the photo? And I testified that I can see one eyelid's a little redder than the other. That's all I'm doing. No one does autopsies remotely, and it's the same thing with a live patient. Directly interacting with them is superior.
All right, if you've been to the 125th subway station in Harlem, New York, you'll recognize criminal defense attorney Philip Hamilton from his new firm's billboard. And of course, as always, co-host Terry Austin here to break down the Reeves trial. Terry, this great question actually showed up on my Twitter, and I think tagged you as well. And I think it's important. Reeves did 8 years of house arrest. If convicted, does any of that count towards his sentence? Why or why not?
Brian, that's a great question, and I'm glad we had someone tweet that question. The answer is no. Reeves has served time under house arrest, and a very long time, but that time does not count towards his sentence. Under Florida law, the sentence doesn't begin to run until the date it is imposed, but the court will allow a defendant to get credit if, in fact, he or she has spent time in the county jail before the sentence. Here, Reeves was not in jail. He was in his house. And as a matter of fact, the house arrest had very liberal terms. He was able to go to church. He could go to medical appointments. He could go to the grocery store. I mean, that's a very liberal house arrest. He initially was in jail, I must add, but he was very quickly let out, and he's been out a very long time. So no, it is absolutely not going to apply as time served. He's going to have to serve whatever time he gets the entire time.
All right, thank you. I am just Lolly for that question. Philip, the defense focused on Reeves' red eye, but if it did or didn't happen because of Olson, does that make out self-defense with deadly force?
No. And I think that's the reason ultimately why they had to focus on the red eye. The red eye was a red herring, I think, from a number of the facts that we already know, essentially predicated what happened here. Olson was talking in a way that Reeves did not appreciate, threw some popcorn at him, and in a road rage style response, took it too far, shot him, killed him. That's objectively what the facts are showing. Of course, the defense has to do its part to, defeat the prosecution's burden, but in many respects, the focus on the red eye, not much more than a red herring.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, especially on summation when they tie together all these facts, but I'm not seeing much for the defense to tie together here. Thank you both. When we come back, day 2 of testimony for ex-Minnesota police officer Tou Thao. What he says happened outside of Cup Foods the day George Floyd was murdered. That's still ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Welcome back. Testimony continues for ex-Minnesota officer Tou Thao as he and 2 other former officers stand trial in the death of George Floyd. Thao, along with Thomas Lane and J. Alexander King, all face federal charges for depriving Floyd of his rights in May 2020. Prosecutors say the 3 ex-cops did not intervene or provide medical aid to Floyd, as fellow former officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck. Last year, Chauvin was convicted in Floyd's murder in state court and has pled guilty to violating Floyd's civil rights in federal court. All 3 defendants in the federal case indicated they will testify in their own defense. Thao's testimony began Tuesday. He told jurors he didn't know Floyd was having medical problems and assumed his fellow officers were caring for him. At the time, Thao was placed on makeshift crowd control as people began gathering. But body camera footage from that day shows Thao saying, "Don't do drugs, guys," to the crowd.
Bro, check his balls, bro. You bogus, bro. Don't do drugs. Bogus. Don't do drugs, bro. What is that? What do you think that is? You call when he doing okay? Get back. You call when he doing okay?
To reporters inside the courtroom, Thao testified he believed Derek Chauvin, a 19-year veteran of the police force, had the situation under control and did not know Chauvin's knee was on Floyd's neck. Pool reporters also noted the prosecution got heated during Thao's testimony on cross-examination as the defense repeatedly objected to questioning. Philip, Thao claims he didn't know Floyd was having a medical emergency, but we just saw there from the video, he says, don't do drugs. So how does that make sense?
It doesn't. I mean, I was looking at that in the video then the same just now as I was 2 years ago. And I think in many respects, the crowd that he was, trying to secure was in many respects not doing anything that he needed to secure. They were trying to inform him what was happening to George Floyd. They were trying to inform him that his partner's knee was on the back of his neck and that he couldn't breathe. One interesting thing, just in terms of the testimony that came out from Tou, was there was a point where he referenced the fact that since 2014, a lot of people had been noting, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And so even to the extent that he heard Floyd saying that, which was another sign that there was an issue here, he disregarded it, just thinking that it was just another thing to say for someone, even though the crowd was trying to let him know what was going on. So does that defense end up working out? It could. Is it a strong one? No.
All right. Well, let's check with Terry. So I tend to agree there because the outside factors. Tou's defense, I was on crowd control. I didn't know what was going on. That may or may not work, to Philip's point. But what about King's defense, considering his role in the death of George Floyd?
I definitely think that King has the worst case, as between King, Lane, and Tou. He was charged with both the failure to intervene and the failure to render this medical aid. And he is basically just trying to say he was doing what he was trained to do. He's also saying that Lane already asked Derek Chauvin to turn Floyd onto his side. So why would he have to repeat that to Derek Chauvin? So he's basically saying there was nothing more that he could independently do. He's basically trying to say that Chauvin was his trainer, and obviously he was following orders. And he had no prior complaints. I'm sure they're going to try to get that in as well. He was really new, as was King. So I think he is basically going to just try to say he did the best he could under those circumstances.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they point the finger at Chauvin. Yes. Well, thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.